Hello everybody. I've had a few people to ask how I got started with computers and the internet. Here's school zone. And I thought I would do a video and try to make it as brief as I can to explain how I got started, in case somebody out there is, wanting to further their career. Of course, I did it the hard way. When I was in the military, I always worked in admin. I always worked in an office in all kinds of capacities. I had all kinds of different jobs when I was in the military. But anyway, I went to work in Oak Ridge, and just to get in the door, I think the school is closed, but tomorrow is Thanksgiving. The school's closed today, I think. But to get an entry-level job at this company in Oak Ridge, I went to work in the mailroom, and I knew what my capabilities were, and I knew if I learned my way around, I could move up in that company, which I did. I started to move up in the admin section. And one day they came to me and said they had like thousands of documents that they needed archived and wanted to know if I wanted to do it. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And so I more or less became a one-man project, and I archived like 25,000 documents, and we placed all the information in a new database that the company had developed using Oracle software. And the more I talked to some of the programmers and saw the way the database was working, I thought, this is something I could learn to do. So I talked to my supervisor and told him that I wanted to pursue it. And what I'd do, I'd come in early, and I'd work as, like putting a fire out to archive as many records as I could, which would give me some time in the afternoon to pursue the relational database management system of Oracle. And I talked to the database administrator and told him what I was doing. And he said, well, I'll help you. But he said, I don't have a lot of time to fool with you. And I said, well, what I'll do is I'm going to study on my own. And if I get between a rock and a hard place, when I come to you, I'll pretty much know what the answer is. I'll just need a little direction. And it'll only take a small percentage of your time. And he said, okay, we'll do that. And that's exactly what I did. And I would study at night. And I started out using a structured query language, which most relational database management systems use for generating reports. And I became proficient in that language, and I started noticing some discrepancies in the report. And I had made enough headway with the database administrator that he knew I knew what I was talking about, and when I found a discrepancy, he would give me the opportunity to rewrite the code, which I did. Well, the supervisor of the admin section started noticing the reports were changing, some of the aesthetics of the report, and the word got to that person that I was doing them. And they came to me, and they could hardly believe what I was doing. And I was doing it, I really wasn't doing it on the sly. The company and people who were much more important in the company than the admin manager knew I was doing it. But anyway, to make a long story short, it was a short time after that that they transferred me into the automated technology department, and I became the reports person. Um, Usually, if anybody needed, especially some of the civil engineers, if they needed a report, they would come to me, and I would go into the database and I would generate a report for them. But at this time, this was before the internet got really geared up, and I don't know if anybody was blowing at me or what. And when I moved in the automated technology department, the guy who sat behind me, we sat in cubicles. Get this, face this sun. He was tasked with pursuing the internet for the company. I don't know the exact dates, but it was in the early stages of the internet, and I could have gotten in onto the ground floor because occasionally I would go back there and talk to him and ask him about it. And each morning when I went in, of course that was back when they used the modems on the telephone lines, and you would always hear that real weird noise when it was connecting to the telephone lines. And I had no interest in the internet. I could kick myself because I could have been in on the ground floor of this internet stuff, but you set your priorities, and I was so involved in relational database management that I just didn't pursue it. So anyway, I retired from the company, and I had devoted all my time with relational database management systems and report writing. So I was proficient at both. And then when I retired from the company, the Oracle software was not in demand for anybody small. So what I did is I started writing reports and relational database management systems using Microsoft Access, which is powerful. And still, I was not involved in the internet other than just going on the internet to get information. Even now, you can go, if you're writing a piece of code and you get between a rock and a hard place, you can go on the internet and you can find somebody that has written a piece of code to make it work. And that's what I would do. That's what I use the internet for. And, writing code for a computer, a lot of people really don't understand this, and nor should they unless they are involved in computers. But the way it works, there's a certain protocol, but you could take 3 programmers and give them a task and tell them to write the code to make it work. And when you looked at the 3 pieces of code from the 3 programmers, it would be as if you went to 3 writers and told them to write a story about an oak tree. All 3 would be telling you about an oak tree, but it would be nothing the same. And computer code is the same way. And anybody listening to this that's a programmer knows exactly what I'm talking about. You can even write code like a Rube Goldberg. I mean, you could write 10 pieces, I mean, you could write hundreds of lines of code to do a simple function, and that's what I'm talking about. And I found the smarter the programmers are, the slicker their code becomes. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I definitely was not a 10, but I worked for a 10. Before I retired from the company, I worked for one of the smartest, most brilliant minds that I have ever known. And I learned so much from this guy. And he was my supervisor, and I would debug his code. He could write computer code, just sit down and write it like writing a story. Whatever the process was that he needed to do, he'd write a piece of code, and it would blow me away. But I've always been a person who will read a manual cover to cover. And he, being a brilliant guy, would never read a manual. So what happened, I started discovering certain nuances with certain things that he didn't even know. So there were times when he would be writing code and I would tell him something that he could do, and he would do it, and he'd look at me, and he would never comment. He would just kind of give me a grin. But he taught me a lot. So when I started writing programs with Microsoft Access, I could do some complicated things. And I received a job. It was working for the Air Force. And a consulting company that had contacted me told me that they wanted to submit a resume of mine to the military because they were in the process of developing human resource and accounting software for the Air Force. So I said, sure, you know. And I got a call from this person who was the supervisor of the quality assurance department. And they started asking me some questions. And I started asking them questions. And I could tell that I was asking questions of things that had already started giving them problems. And there was a certain question I asked, and as soon as I asked the question, the person said, "Can you be down here Monday to go to work?" And I knew that my background, I mean, I knew there was no problems with, you know, with getting on the Air Force Base. So I said, sure, I'll be there. And I went down, still not really involved that much in the internet, other than just going out and, you know, studying what other programmers had accomplished and how they wrote a piece of code or what they used. So I worked at that job about 9 months, and when I came back, one day I was reading an article, and it was talking about two guys, David Chen and Steve Hurley, I think the guys' names were, had developed a video sharing internet site called YouTube. And Google had offered them $1.5 million for YouTube. And I thought, what in the world is this? So this was in 2006. So I went out to YouTube and created an account. And I went to a local department store and I purchased a little webcam. I paid, I think, $19.95 for it. And I just started talking like we're doing now and placing them on the internet. And back then in 2006, there was not that many people posting videos. So we more or less became a kind of a society or a community. Some of those guys were really, really good. I mean, I was never, you know, I mean, I'd get on there, but I was not, I didn't consider myself in their category because some of those guys were, I mean, they were funny. I mean, they would do funny stuff. So anyway, I started posting videos in 2006. And then one day someone sent me an email. I would mention their name, but I don't like to mention people's names. They sent me an email and said, why don't you create a Facebook account? And I said, okay, I'll do that. So I created a Facebook account, and I must have had it a year, and I never did anything with it. And then I started jabbering on Facebook. And as you know, if you're on Facebook, it's not long before it becomes addictive. And that's the way it became with me. And then I really got involved in the internet. I remember I had a friend on YouTube. He was from New York, and he did a video talking about some guys he knew were starting an internet site called Twitter, and they were accepting a certain amount of people to apply for an account. So I did. So I've had a Twitter account almost from day one, but I've never used Twitter. The only thing I use is YouTube and Facebook. And there was one other thing. I can't think. But anyway, in the last, since like 2006, is when I really got involved in the internet. And I'm very involved today. But that's how I arrived at this point, sitting in the parking lot of Wally World doing a video. We'll see you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.